So you have to build building blocks to start understanding, you know, what self-mastery is, why it's important to know yourself, right? Know thyself. So if you don't know yourself, it's really hard, or you don't have a really good understanding of who you are, then growth will seem like, a mystery. Sometimes we don't understand what direction we need to grow or what growth is. Why we start dying, why does the body start dying? If it's not growing, it's dying. So we'll cover a lot of these things in the third class, but we're going to start with, who we are. What are you? Right? I mean, that's kind of the main thing. A lot of times we'll say things like, I'm an electrician, or I'm this, or I'm that, but those are just temporary states of being. And those are temporary states. So, what is self mastery? The ability to create your own state of being regardless of external stimuli. So this is growth happens over time, and growth happens forever. The ability to create your own state of being during that process is what actually expedites the growth process. Right? If you get pulled into negative emotional states or don't believe that you can, learn something or grow in something, then it will always pull you out of the growth cycle, and you'll have to nurture and make sure that you're bleeding off some kind of negative energy to make sure that you get back in the growth cycle. So these are our major topics. We're going to go through definitions, what you are, who you are. We're a three-part being, and cover the masculine and feminine aspects of what that is. And then we'll lead into final thoughts, uh, to uh, lead into the next class, because each class builds upon each other. And parasitic attachments, there's a lot of different parasitic attachments that restrict growth that will lead into our growth class. So let's get started. Who are you? Right? So if you look at these three pictures, all three are toroidal fields. We call them toroidal fields. And if we look at anything in nature, whether we're looking at our own body, or that lower picture down on the lower left, or that big picture, I love that picture of the galaxy because it shows a central point and then a field around that with everything coming from and collapsing to that center point. And this is the same thing with your own body, right? We all have a heart where everything comes from and goes back to. So if you look at the top picture, it's actually a toroidal field that has a positive and negative pole. When we think about our own electrical circuit, everything above our heart space is our creative circuit. This is what we're creating generally. It's a positive, and then everything in the lower portion is negative. It's what's coming into the heart space. So you could say that, and recently, I just learned this just a few days ago, that the heart is built just like a field in and of itself. It actually creates that vortex in the middle where everything's coming from and going back to that one point. And so it's why it's so important where, many spiritualists have said to follow your heart. If we can follow our heart, then we are always in a growth cycle and getting to the heart space. We'll cover more of that later. But if you look at this picture, it says you are not anything temporary. If it is something that changes, and it's something you have or something that you're creating, but it's not inherently who you are. So if you look at this picture, there's the three major parts. There's the center, there's the structure that is coming from the center, and then there's the field of energy that's surrounding that. Everything has electromagnetic signature. So your own body has an electromagnetic signature, and you have a structure within it. So the structure would be the masculine aspect, and the field that's surrounding it would be the feminine aspect, the electromotive force, right? So we have both all three of those aspects. And when you say that if you're nothing that's temporary, the structure and the field changes over time, which means that's something that you're creating, not necessarily what you are. So you are the center point. You are the creator. So this picture just kind of, works on that. So you are the source of that thing, and then it's creating a structure within a field. And then when we look really close at uh, the structures are actually made up of fields stacked up on top of each other that switch back and forth between positive and negative like that. It's very interesting when we look at what physicists have commonly called matter. When we break it down, there really isn't any matter there. It's just all empty space. And, they try to say that there's particles, but when we look closer at the particles, oh, wait, that thing's made up of mostly empty space. And this is true. It's just the structure is made up of more small fields. That's the flopping back and forth of the masculine and feminine aspects of how everything's built. And so I took me a while to find this picture because I wanted to get a sideways profile. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this picture because our chakra system is built the same way. They're just fields within fields. So you have one main biofield, which is shown there on the left, where you've got your creative circuit and then your receptive circuit. But then each chakra, each energy center in the body, and we have way more than 7 chakras. You can measure them, and some people say that we have over 100. Well, we have an infinite number of fields within the body as you look closer and closer and closer. But as we go from the bottom, you'll see that the direction that the everything is moving is just like the arrow picture on the bottom of that picture, where on the front side of our body, everything is coming in, and then everything is going out on the back side, and then it circles around back. Same thing happens with the overall field. We're producing, and then it's coming back, just like I'm, making this podcast. So I'm producing energy, and then it's coming back to me in ways that I'm not yet aware of because it takes cycles to see what comes back as I'm producing something. So if we go from the bottom to the top, or from the bottom to the top here, this isn't the most accurate picture because it's showing the root chakra is just kind of pointing down, which isn't necessarily accurate. Um, it is and isn't. The root chakra is how we're positioned in 3-dimensional space. Right? So it's a lower vibrational chakra. So if you notice, the colors of each of the chakras change as they go up, and they go into a higher vibrational color because um, you're moving from a lower density to a higher density. So that root chakra has what you're receiving and what you're creating. So you both are receiving inputs from where you are at in 3-dimensional space, and you're projecting from your third eye chakra an idea that's coming back to your root chakra as to where you believe you are in 3-dimensional space. There's a lot of testimonies of yogis that were able to move themselves in 3-dimensional space without moving. We can talk about more about that in the growth class, but it's just something to think about where each energy center you're both uh, obtaining information from your environment and creating what you believe to be the case in each situation. So the orange chakra would be your sacral chakra, your sexual energy, right? How you're interacting directly and producing other things in 3-dimensional space, right? Your driving force. So what are you creating in 3-dimensional space, and what is being input towards you? When you think about any kind of sexual act, when we're connected at our sacral chakra, you're both giving and receiving feeling at that spot, and that's what creates the heightened, you know, trade-off back and forth until you make a baby. Right? So everything is connected in its own way that it resonates with to produce something of itself. We go to the yellow chakra, your solar plexus chakra. And we'll talk quite a bit about the solar plexus chakra later. But the solar plexus chakra has a unique term, solar, right? Why is it called solar? It's because it's where all the light that's coming towards you is surrounding the heart space. So it's where you shine. It's where your confidence is built, how you feel about yourself, how you're presenting yourself to other people. Um, and then the feedback that you get. And the idea of all of these, and it's part of self-mastery, is to transmute anything that's coming towards you and turning it into what you believe you are, which is why this first class is so important. We want to know who we are, that we're creating that state of being before we don't want to just be who we think other people think we are, right? Or if somebody's projecting a negative energy at you, you want to say, well, that's fine, whatever you believe, but this is who I am, right? And I am source. I am creating my own state of being. Same thing with the heart chakra. And the heart chakra is the center of your biofield. And so it's always equated with love and unconditional love. And that's a healthy heart chakra when you can unconditionally love yourself and then produce that for your environment. This will be really important when we get to parasitic attachments and growth. If you ever fall out of unconditional love, it puts you in a perception from your third eye chakra that will short circuit your biofield and then distort other energies in your biofield um, to create that state of being. Whenever you're feeling something other than unconditional love for yourself or somebody else, always think of it as I'm creating this feeling. And it takes a long time a lot of times to understand whether or not you're picking up on an emotional state or a thought form from your environment, or if you're actually producing it yourself from something that maybe you're holding and that you haven't healed within yourself. Um, Hold on, let's go back. If I let my cursor go to the wrong place, it'll just flip to the next slide. So now we go to our throat chakra. I like to think of our throat chakra as a connection point between our third eye chakra and our heart space, because our heart is always producing from the heart, the mouth speaks, right? That's a common saying. I believe it's a biblical saying. And that's true. The condition of your heart will indicate how you're speaking into your environment. If you're showing love and appreciation for the people around you, and if you're not, then usually it's an indication of an unhealed heart, right? Everything is growing around us, and it's good to think of it that way because it's constantly becoming more self-aware. If you look at the head of my healer channel page, it says life is evolution, or the purpose of life is evolution, and that's true. If we look at the historical record, every single leap of evolution was always an expansion of awareness. And then we saw a more complicated structure. It was able to move more light or more energy and information through its biofield. The jump between dinosaurs almost immediately went to birds and mammals that were living on the ground. They were more complex structures that were able to move more energy and information in their system. And, historically, humans, the way we are now, are only about 200,000 or 300,000 years old in the historical record. So we are a leap in evolution from everything else that existed on this planet, and we're able to move more energy and information than anything before us. And so both the structure and how much, as the structure changes and it becomes more complex, it's able to move more energy because there's more information within the field. Um, so our throat chakra, right? So, and it moves both ways. So me speaking out there is also in a lot of ways a belief in how I'm being feeling I'm being received. And you have to kind of be impartial to how you're being received so that you can speak more appropriately and speak from your heart space from a healed heart. Third eye chakra, right? And this one is something that spiritualists have talked a long time about, is how we project our own views of reality around us, and then that's what we receive. If everything, when we looked at those last pictures, when you get to the larger biofield, when you look at that, if you look at a picture of a galaxy, there's only one point in the middle where everything's coming from. So in space time, and we always call it space time because you can't take one from the other. There's no such thing as just feminine or just masculine. Everything is feminine and masculine in its structure and the way it's built. But if we're male or female, we're actually more tuned to one side, which is why, generally speaking, men have a tendency to be more intellectual, and women have a tendency to be more in contact with their emotional states. And so they attract for that reason, because one complements the other, where men might not be as in touch with their emotional states and their intuition, and women are. So men are attracted to that, and women might not be as connected to the information that's moving energy in their field, and so they might be attracted to the male aspects. Now, these are just generalizations, right? All of us are different in our makeup and what we're attuned to. But the idea is to marry both within the body so that we're balanced in both. When we move on up past our third eye chakra and how we're viewing ourselves and how we're projecting that onto our environment, moves to the crown chakra and on up. The crown chakra is indicated in this slide by the purple chakra on the top, and then there's a white chakra up above that. But when you look at pictures, a lot of times there's just multiple layers of chakras from the top to bottom. Um, uh, and the crown chakra is an extension where you kind of get an overall view. You start to move into higher pictures of what's going on around you, and everything's growing. If we look at our society at large, a lot of times it'll look like it's breaking down. But the reality is everything is always in that process. Everything is dying and be reborn. And death is a transformation process, especially when we look at the picture and say that if we're source, it doesn't matter what structures we see that are temporary, they're being created from source. And so if everything is non-local, then the reality is that who we are is everything and a part of it at the same time. And what makes you feel more whole or more a part of all of it is as you start to create from those higher chakras. So the heart. The heart is, a lot of people call it a pump, but the heart is the center of our biofield. And I think we've already covered enough about the heart, what unconditional love is and how it enables you to access more of the field because you're no longer attached to one part or the other. If you can accept it and view it the way it is, this is kind of the start of self-mastery. Understanding that and understanding that we are the heart of the system that we're in, because everything you ever experience will always come from your own heart. When you go back to that picture and see how it works, if everything's coming from your heart space and then it goes out and then it comes back to you in cycles, that means that everything you ever experience comes from your heart space. So, if you feel like you're in conflict with your environment, or you're fighting it in some way, it usually means that you've got some kind of blockage in your heart, which is leading to a blockage in the way that you speak to your environment, which is a distortion of your third eye chakra. And it leads to distortions in your lower chakras because that's what you're going to receive, is what you're creating. It comes out and then it comes back. So let's go to the next slide.
Your ripple.
Battle of the sexes, right? There's really no battle. I love this picture because it really explains everything about masculine and feminine. Where the seedlings move into the womb, the egg, or the energy for the information that's entering it. And there's been a lot of studies as far as, because they've always tried to take a picture of where the sperm actually penetrates the egg. And I heard from one doctor, and I don't know if this is true, and I can get feedback from you guys whether or not this is true or not, but they've never actually seen a picture of the sperm penetrating the outer layer of the egg sac. And we'll move into that when we get to growth, about the state of surrender. If you think about it, the egg is going to accept the sperm that is in the least conflict with its environment, because if for evolution to occur, you kind of have to be the best version of what your dad had to offer. If the other pieces of information that were sent towards the egg were in conflict with each other and they're all fighting, the egg doesn't want that. The egg wants the one that's going to surrender to it. right? And that's how it penetrates the layer. And so all of us are the best that our dads had to offer, right? The best information that your mom would accept. So when we define masculine and feminine, you can define it as time space or time and energy. Um, on the masculine side, we've got time. Time creates structure. I don't know if you guys have ever watched any of the videos of people taking frequency and applying it to, let's say, a table that's covered in sand. And as you increase the frequency, structures get created on the sand that are more complicated. So, and this is kind of what people talk about raising your frequency, because as you raise your frequency, you're moving more information in the body and actually changing your structure. They've also done studies. I think it was a Japanese scientist that was studying how people were projecting emotional states into water and then watching water actually change form by projected emotional states in the water. Um, the structure is moving the energy. So it's always tied with providing, right? It's the masculine aspect of our biofield. We're providing the creative energy. It's, described as information, number of times, which creates information or cycles. And it's defined as pure creative potential. On the feminine side, it's described as a container, right? You become the container so that you can listen. You're more receptive. It's the lower portion of your biofield. You're receiving energy. It describes your intuition because your intuition, if you can expand your awareness on your from your feminine aspect, you're actually listening to more and nurturing your environment. And it's your pure receptive potential instead of your masculine creative potential. And ideally, you want to balance both so that you're always working from the womb of creation. I love that term, womb of creation. It's in a lot of spiritual texts, including the Bible. It's referenced in a lot of different ways. They talk about the uh, the mother, the divine mother, and the divine masculine. In the Bible, it talks, always kind of refers to the father, but that term in Hebrew actually includes, it's not strictly masculine. It's a masculine feminine word, and it's just the way that that text or that language is created, include both. Um, and when we think about it, we all have both. We can't not have both because you can't have nothing would move without energy, but the energy doesn't move without number of times. So there's no way that you can get around being both masculine and feminine, whether you like it or not. So let's go to the next slide. So the tarot is extremely old, and I don't know if any of you follow tarot. You can believe in tarot if you do, if you don't, that's fine. But it really shows a lot of aspects of both aspects of masculine and feminine that are very interesting. And it's why tarot readers have gone to cards and they use those cards to describe aspects of the self um, that are maturing or maybe need work on or growth. And all of us do usually at certain times. If we ever fall out of balance and we're trying to heal something internally, um, there's always some aspect of the self that we're trying to heal. On the top side, you could look at it as your creative energy, all the kings. Now, there's more cards in the deck that are masculine, but I chose to use these because um, all four of each card comes together to become one card on the left. So all the king cards, once those are mastered, becomes the emperor. And then same on the bottom. Once all the four queen cards are mastered, then you become the empress. On the top side, you could say the king. If this is your creative energy, that means that you're speaking your truth, right? This is your sword of truth, your mental energy. On the right hand side, this is your creative energy, your will. That's your ability to create. And the King of Cups is your emotional energy, the emotional aspect that you're providing for your environment um, to make sure that people feel loved. And the King of Pentacles, you're what you're providing for your environment from the materially, from a good spiritual state, where it's kind of your state of being that you're providing for your environment. Maybe you need to provide for your children to make sure that they grow in the right way, but not over provide, making sure that you're balanced in how you're providing for your environment, which gets you to that Emperor energy. On the bottom side, the Queen of Swords is blocking things that don't serve her, right? Because it's your receptive energy. You're standing there with your sword, say, cutting away the things that are just unnecessarily sapping your energy. And the Queen of Wands, her creative energy. So she's naturally attracting everything that she needs to create what she needs to create. Queen of Cups, right? How she's nurturing her environment, how she's caring for everything around her, and what she's attracting. And then her Queen of Pentacles. And you'll notice both the Queen of Pentacles and the King of Pentacles are surrounded by pictures of growth. It means that you're both nurturing and providing for your environment, right? So you're helping it grow. Um, Very interesting, right? And this is more of your receptive energy in the Queen of Pentacles, where you're receiving everything you need to keep growing, which falls into the Empress energy. So ideally, self-mastery, you've really reached a real state if you can master your Emperor and Empress energy and combine those two, where you're receiving everything you need to create, what you need for yourself and your environment. Which ends up being the Fool. Now, the Fool is a very interesting card in the tarot deck. It is the card of infinite potential, and it's also the only zero card in the deck. The deck has 22 major arcana, and the zero card is a very interesting card. If we look closely at the card, the center picture here, the Fool is covered in growth. He has, and it's tattered. Right? His travels are worn, and he's traveling very lightly, and he's carrying a white rose, which symbolically is means unconditional love. He has a pure heart, and so he's constantly taking leaps of faith and constantly growing by doing so, and carrying very little. He's not carrying, or she, it could be masculine or feminine, and the card really doesn't make it look like it's a man or a woman. It's kind of a sexless character. And so in order to keep taking leaps of faith, you really can't be carrying a lot of baggage. So he's just got a little tote on it, and he's got a little dog with him. And he's surrounded right by the sun, is right behind him. So that's kind of his source. And so it kind of equates to the same infinite potential of your will, your mind, your emotions, and your spiritual well-being, and your abundance, tied to all four of those cards. So here's some final thoughts, right? Everything is in relation to one another. Quality of that relation depends on your own self-knowledge and who you are, right? Your source. And that's why I always say it's always best if whatever you're experiencing, whatever emotional state you're experiencing, always think of it as I'm creating that, regardless of whether you're picking it up from your environment. If you're not able to transmute that and create what you want to create for yourself, always tell yourself that. It's like, this is what I am creating for myself. The Fool's journey has been taught by mystics for eons. Learn how thoughts and emotions directly affect and control the world around us, right? Because when you look at a picture of the biofield, it extends infinitely around you. And so you're constantly getting cycles back. And a lot of people talk about previous lifetimes. Maybe you're even getting things back from previous lifetimes that you have to transmute and heal within the body, to continue to grow. And self-mastery is gained over time by understanding what we are first and growing to control more of our unconscious mind. This is something that I talked about recently in a post that I made. When we measure the body, a lot of times people say, well, we're only working from 10% of our mind. And if that's true, that means that most of our actions are 90% unconscious. So the idea is to become more and more aware of what you're creating in your life, to become more conscious. And then it will, if you set the right boundaries, and we'll get more to that in parasitic attachments and growth, then you'll make your uh, environment more aware of itself and pull it into a state of growth as well. So you are what? How would you define yourself? Feel free to unmute yourself. I mean, I'd love to find out if you've learned something from this, or if maybe it prompted something to think about, that maybe a story that you could tell, maybe something you experienced that makes sense to you. Because, from a early age, I grew up and I always knew that the people around me were kind of creating their own reality. I saw it in my parents. I saw it in people that I went with to school. If you see somebody around you that's heavily conflicted or always down on themselves, and people will, if you're projecting that, then that's the image you're projecting. And so your environment will treat you according to the image that you project. And so we're all creating that reality for ourselves. So um, either one of you guys want to add anything to that? Don or Wanda? I won't put you on the spot. It's something that I've learned over time, and a lot of spiritual teachers have taught the same thing. Um, let's go to the next slide. So before the start of the next class, I would like, the solar plexus chakra is very interesting to me. The picture on the upper left-hand side is a picture of a black hole. And you can see how everything around it gets brighter as it gets closer to the event horizon. So this is where you shine, right? This is your solar plexus chakra is actually, and if you think about what it does in your own body, the solar plexus actually is getting rid of it's getting rid of all the unconscious energy in the body, right? If you've got dead skin cells or anything that dies in the body, it gets put into the gut so that it can get transmuted and then exit from the body. So if you look at a field, any field, whether it's the galaxy on the right or how your own body works, you'll notice that everything gets brighter as it goes towards the center because it's all getting transmuted and pulled into the center, um, for so that it can get processed and then spit back out of the heart space. And you'll notice that everything that's coming out is invisible. When we think about our own biofield, everything, all our creative energy, the words that I'm speaking, our thoughts, and on up are all things that we can't see, right? But eventually it will manifest into three-dimensional space in the lower chakras that we can experience and touch. The car you're driving, at one point, it had to start as an idea in someone's head, and they had to share that idea so that it could be created and actually be manifested in three-dimensional space. So think about that when if you ever have any ideas, you have to share your ideas or they will never get manifested because you have to put it out in your environment and then before you're able to experience it. Every business works this way, but we can talk about more on parasitic attachments of why the things that we've built. A lot of spiritualists talk about this, how it's a distorted masculine energy. And it's true in a lot of ways because we've built things and created things, but didn't nurture our environment by doing so. Um, so it wasn't balanced. What we were creating wasn't balanced. It didn't have a healing energy component to it to change the momentum of maybe negative projections in our environment. But when we look at the sun or anything bright, that's what it's doing. Your gut is doing that, right? It's getting rid of the unconscious energy in the body so that you can continue to grow. That is it for this presentation. It was about 40 minutes. If we had more people, maybe we would have had more time for more feedback. If you guys ever want to get a hold of me, you can email me at bcurtis@bcurtis.org. You can see my website at bcurtis.org. It has a lot of my YouTube videos. I didn't put up my YouTube video channel here, but you can find it at bcurtis.org. And if you ever, feel like you need help with something, there's my Calendly. Like, if you ever need to get a hold of me and schedule a time with me. The purpose of this is to help you understand, though, that you have every power to grow to yourself. And if you just get in your natural creative energy, do what your heart is telling you to do. Because if you can follow your heart, it will pull you into a growth process where over time you'll bleed off negative projections about yourself. It helps you strengthen your core because you'll start transmuting any negative projections in your environment where maybe you don't feel good about yourself. And then eventually you get to a place where it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, right? Because you've grown to a place where you could transmute anything that's coming at you and feel firmly rooted in three-dimensional reality and be able to speak with the people around you and then co-create in a much healthier way. And then you'll see other people and where they were at and be able to nurture your environment in a much healthier way. So hope that helps. If you guys have anything to add, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much the end.
Hmm, not right now. I think I'm just trying to consume what you said. So that's for me.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the feedback. I at the beginning of this, I was going to say that, there's some of it kind of seems a little bit technical when you think about it. But if you just let it absorb for a while and think about, okay, who am I? And it's best not to get the toughest part about, mastering yourself is not to get caught up on temporary emotional states or thought forms, because all of us have different things that we have to learn and overcome. And it gets much more difficult to overcome those things if we try to identify with a temporary emotional state or a thought form. And if you identify with that, you'll get pulled into saying, this is who I am. And so this is why I start with this set of slides, because I want you guys to understand that you are the source of everything you experience, but not anything at any particular time, because everything changes. Everything we experience changes. Everything that we experience changes. So we're co-creating all of that together, but it's all temporary. And it's not actually who we are. We are the creator of those things. So, yeah. If that's it, I'll call her quits. Thank you guys for showing up. I really appreciate it. It was really nice to see a couple people show up. We had a lot of people sign up. I think we had 30 people sign up, but it's pretty normal to have only a few people show up after a lot of people that say they're going to, just because we get busy and forget. We mean to go places. I've done the same thing, right? So love you guys. Have a beautiful day. And feel free to sign up for the next class. You'll probably get notifications in your email box about the next class. Class should start next week. Might not start until the following week, but you'll get notifications if you're interested in the following class. So thanks again. Catch you guys later.